I'm Shannon Hayden, and I thought I would start with a little bit of my background, share my story a bit, and how I came to do what I do with the electric cello, and then demonstrate some, and then take questions. So they're very good questions, and then maybe demonstrate a few more things, and then maybe some hands-on activities up here, and a little bit more of an analysis of what's going on up here. I want to thank Matt very much, my amazing sound tech, great friend, bandmate, various scenarios, and he has really helped me over the years put together this rig, and always has new suggestions and always new recommendations for how to spend my money. So I actually grew up an hour and a half south of here in the Martinsville, Marshall area, and on an off-grid farm. And some of my first classical concerts were actually experienced here. And my parents, when I was 7, 8, 9 or so, started bringing me up here. We would start the evening going to probably one of your concerts, that's what happened. And then also my favorite cellist at the time still was teaching, she was here at the time, her husband was teaching here at the time, Natalia Colma. And she was my Michael Jordan, and I was like, that's who I'm going to be someday. I'm going to be up there on stage. I'm going to be Natalia. And so we would see a performance by her and her husband. I remember they did a lot of duos. And then we would inevitably end up at a rock show if my parents could get me in, if I was not of age, we'd see the all ages venues. And then we inevitably end up the night at maybe the Red Herring, which was kind of underground electronic cafe and club. And I remember many nights I'd fallen asleep at the table, and then we'd go home, and I was homeschooled, still had to get up the next morning, practice my cello, do my studies. And I'm very grateful that my parents did all that for me, because I had been begging them for a cello since I was 3. And the reason I was begging them for a cello is because I saw Bjork on TV with the Icelandic string octet. And that was my first time seeing the cello, and absolutely loved it. And then around the same time, I heard Eleanor Rigby by the Beatles, and I was like, ooh, what's that dark, deep instrument, string quartet? I want to play that. And I like to kind of stress this story because I just loved music, and I wanted to get into playing music of all kinds, and not necessarily just playing Bach for the rest of my life. I loved Bach. We had Bach on in the house. We had Yes going. We had all kinds of progressive 70s records. From my dad's album collection, we had Ministry at different times, all kinds of music happening, and I just wanted the cello. I was drawn to that being my tool of expression, to play all kinds of styles of music. So I begged my parents for a cello when I was 3, and they thought it was a weird phase. And then finally around the age of 7, they were like, oh, we'll do this. We'll find a rental for you and find a teacher. And my classical training was very unlike, what I would kind of go home and experience. My dad was a visual artist. He had an entirely different approach to the creative side of things. And when I would go into my classical lessons, not everybody has this history with classical training, but I certainly did. I had the most traditional teachers. I had strict Russian teachers. I studied with Jonas Starker at IU from the age of 12 to 16, and he's extremely strict, very do not look past the notes on the page. And in fact, I remember, rest in peace, he was an amazing teacher, Mr. Starker. I do remember him saying at one point, do not emote. And I was like, oh my goodness, that's crazy. I thought that's what we got into music for. So very strict classical training, and which is a fantastic foundation. I was very happy for that. It's an amazing tool in my tool set. But for the rest of my musical training, I definitely had to look outside of that. And so at the age of 12, I started playing guitar. I'd always wanted to play guitar as well. And I picked one up, and at that time I was playing in like college symphonies around, Terre Haute Symphony, EIU, and I was making some money as a 12, 13-year-old, and I was spending all that money on guitar gear. You know, just like get that, go to Guitar Center, buy a bunch of gear, and I was just so fascinated by the instrument. Not necessarily because the instrument itself, but just people's perception of it and how they approached it. And I just saw a lot of people doing a whole lot of things with it. And I didn't see that as much with the cello at that time. There's definitely people doing it, but I just didn't see that as much. So it just kind of changed my perception of music, and I was writing with bands, and I was improvising for the first time, and I was learning about sound manipulation. And one day, I was about 14 or 15, and I realized that I was playing lead guitar in bands, and I was constantly trying to get, I'm always trying to get more sustain of the guitar. You know, I was like trying to shred and get more sustain of the guitar. And I realized, I'm like, oh, I want a bow. I want a bow for my guitar. And then I was like, well, here's a cello. That's a sustained, bowed instrument. What would that sound like through my pedals? So that was the day, I think I was 15. And it was quite a process to figure out how to amplify my acoustic cello at that time. I just did the thing of just ordering a Fishman, very simple, basic Fishman piezo pickup, and being sad about how it sounded. It wasn't the full, instrument sound, but I loved what I could do with it through my pedals. And so over the years, I just continued to research and study and try to figure out the best ways to try to amplify that cello. But I was mostly very inspired when I would show up to my rock band shows and play guitar, but I'd bring my cello too. And my bandmates were always kind of embarrassed by this. They were always like, "Oh, the cello," and they would apologize. They're like, "Oh, we're gonna play some soft stuff here with the cello," and I get it out, and people went crazy over it. Yeah, because I would put it through distortion effects, all kinds of stuff, and I was like, "Oh, I think there's something to this. There's something to keep on pursuing." So all the while, I was still pursuing my classical studies, and I went to Yale University at 18 for the School of Music, and very traditional way of teaching there, of course. But I was very excited that my professor there, Aldo Periso, even though he was 90 something when I arrived there, was actually pretty progressive for who he was. He was pretty progressive. He was always looking for instruments that were louder. So, because for the big concert halls, he's like, no one can hear the instrument. We need louder cellos, louder cellos. And it reminded me actually of a story that had to do here in Champaign at the Krannert Center. When I was a young kid, Yo-Yo Ma played at Krannert Center, and I had grown up hearing, his PBS special on Bach cello suites, and hearing this beautiful recordings of his work and all the verb. As I listen back now, there's a lot of verb on the recordings. I'm like, oh, this is kind of progressive for the time, But I remember showing up to Krannert Center in the Great Hall, and you just could not hear him. He just plays strictly acoustic, and he's an amazing cellist and all this stuff, of course. And it would be nice to be like 5 feet from him, but for these modern halls, I was just like, oh, how does it? So fast forward to my time with Professor Periso, he recognized that. He was like the only one that I worked with that actually recognized there's an issue here. Like the instrument is not, it's relevant in settings, like in recordings, in smaller halls, all that stuff, but it has a hard time remaining relevant in the large concert halls that we're not used to. Never mind stadiums and all that stuff. So one day I asked him, like, Periso, can I bring in my rig? Can I play electrically for you? And I had my 1890s cello and with the pickup and everything. He's like, okay. He had no idea what I was talking about. He's like, yeah, he was intrigued. Bring it in. So I brought this whole thing in, a very early version. And I was playing, and then all of a sudden he's like, stop. I was like, oh, he probably hates it. He's like, now turn the machine off. oh, he needs to turn the sound down. So I went over to the fader and just turned the fader down. And he said, now play. And I played acoustically. And he said, stop. And I said, yes. And he's like, God, how pathetic sounding. It was so funny. I mean, I don't think it was that pathetic sounding. I love my cello sound. But in general, like, compared to like the kind of glorified, the loud signal I was giving beforehand, he was not impressed after that. So I took that as encouragement also to continue doing what I was doing. And after school, like I said, it was a very, very, very traditional course in training at Yale, which I expected. I mean, there was no recording arts program. There was no even like business program for students to like learn about music and business and how to maybe get a career afterward. None of that stuff. So I just started doing what I wanted to do. I started traveling. For the last decade, I've been traveling with various groups and my solo project all over the place, and performing, producing, and writing with various groups. And the diversity I feel that I've created within my own career has enabled me to make a living at it. It's the arts, so it's not always stable at the moment. It's like, oh, this year is going to be good. This year's try something different here. But I can't imagine not having these skills that have enabled me to kind of call my own shots and not be so reliant on positions that. Another story I am reminded of is my teacher at 10 years old, a very, very strict Russian Moscow conservatory trained teacher. And she was telling me at 10, she's like, there's only 2,000 jobs in this country. And so you have to be good enough to get one of those jobs. You better be working as hard as you can now. And I remember thinking, and I remember telling my dad that. I was like, yeah, I don't even quite know how to comprehend what you're saying, My dad was like, well, what if you make your own job? And so I was like, yeah. And so I always, thankfully, I was in a household where no one was telling me, get a real job. And, or encouraged me to go the traditional way. And, because I certainly had a lot of that outside the household. And I'm very thankful that I just always figured out how to create my own path. And it wasn't scary to me as a result. This song is called Through the Ice Caves, and I thought it was appropriate for the 8 inches of snow we had down in Nashville last week.
Beautiful. So how much of that is improvised?
That particular one is all arranged out. Um, and through compose, I believe is the proper nomenclature. But I do leave room in my performances for improv, and things are always going to be like slightly different, you know, the timing, the loops and stuff. But this song is through composed. And I like to be able to, because I know that's a thing with electric instruments. Sometimes people are like, oh, is there anything written for it and all this stuff, which I'm like, well, all the traditional repertoire, I don't know it. But I do like, you know, because I started more in the improvisatory side of things, and it's still a big part of what I do. But I like the fact, because a lot of people are like, oh, it's going to be different every night, right? And it's like, these are just improvisations. And I like to be consistent with that. It's like there's room in the set for improv, and then there's room in the set where no, this is a piece actually composed for all the elements that are in my rig. And figuring out right now how to notate that is an interesting thing for me. And also it's kind of, that's where I'm kind of getting held up a little bit, is how to write this stuff for people who have different rigs. This bridge is a Barbera cello bridge pickup, and I love them. You use that here as well, right? And many people have tried to get me to use other pickups, and I have ordered them all, and I've used them all, and this is what I always come back to. And I have this installed on my acoustic cello as well, and it sounds, that's still, I think, my preferred setup, because I just, nothing beats the resonance under my ear. I love that, you know. But it's not great for all settings, you know. It'd be pretty loud in this room. I'd have to have this pretty cranked, you know. So starting there, and then I think the most important thing for me right now is the IR, impulse response pedal, that I run this pickup through. It's called Tone Dexter by Audio Sprockets, and I cannot recommend them enough. It's for any instrument, so you record, ideally, you know, you have a myriad of mics and different settings you can do this in, but you put it in record mode and it learns the sound of your acoustic instrument, and for a minute, and using the microphone of your choice, and then it maps that sound onto whatever instrument you play through it at that point. So what I did, and actually they said this was not going to work. You know, they actually apparently intended for this to be for acoustic electric instruments. So you record the sound of your acoustic cello, and then it will map that onto the pickup that's on your acoustic cello. And I said, well, I'm running it for electric. And they're like, that's not gonna work. I'm like, well, why not? I'm gonna try it. And I tried many different mics and many different mic types and many different settings, and one worked really well, you know. So I can't highly recommend enough. Just really, maybe even going into a studio when, if you get this and just having fun, renting a studio for an hour, trying different mics. I don't know if, you know, just 4 different options, getting the best recording you can of your instrument, and then storing it in there. And it's good for any instrument, you know. And then start there, and then I go into my Fractal FM9 multi-effects pedal. And this is a recent thing for me. Before this, I had the Line 6 HD500, I think for 10 years. So I was very happy with it for 10 years, and I promised myself that I was to upgrade, I was going to go, for me, big. But I still love that thing, and I wish I knew what it was today. But, and then for my looper, I use a Boss RC600, And for another, I also have another smaller multi-effects unit, it's the Eventide H9. And there's two reasons for that. I just love the harmonizing feature on the H9 a lot. I've grown used to some of the sounds. I did not want to get rid of that. Another thing I feel like it helps with my rig is just in case either one of these multi-effects units died right before a show, I have another one. And this has happened, and I can safely say that I used to use Ableton back in the day for all my effects live, and it died right before a show, and during sound check, and I ran down to the local guitar shop, and I got a Boss Octaver, I got a Boss delay pedal, and a reverb, a Boss reverb, and I can safely say I did the whole show with that. So it's possible. I've just grown very used to this rig, but you can do it with just a few Boss pedals from Guitarson. Fortunately, the Luger is still working. But I'm running all this because for my full live show, I do run multiple instruments. But also, I love running my acoustic electric instrument. I love running my electric cello. I love play guitar. I have two mics, one for main vocals, one for looping. And it's really difficult to run all those instruments into this one thing. So Matt here recommended the Midas MR18, I think, as the mixer to run everything into. I think Behringer makes a cheaper option for it. But really any kind of mixer will work, but this works the best for me. And so I'm running all the instruments into this mixer, and then as an effects out, I'm running the loop station so that all instruments can be run to the same loop station. And other instruments include, I have a sampler here. I play a little bit of keys until I can have a pianist on the road with me. This is what I have for now, and it does the job. It works. We call this a spaceship. Matt recently built this out for me, and I think that's about it. I run my own in-ears, which I'm not using right now, but run my own in-ears so that I don't have to, rely on the venues for monitors. It's always nice. What?
Does that also help with feedback issues and blind spotting issues?
Yes, I was gonna say, of course, the sound engineer in the room would say that, and not relying on the monitors, I can therefore get various, well, one, my vocals can be wetter with more reverb, which is nice. And then with acoustic electric instruments, I just don't have to worry about it as much. Feeding back, I still maintain, I don't think this instrument, he doesn't want to take a chance, but I don't think with the Barbera bridge on the acoustic cello, it does seem pretty feedback resistant. But in-ears is very helpful with that as well. And I think that is about it for the rig. Is there anything I missed?
The tripod for your cello.
It is a bassoon stand, and I'm actually trying to remember the brand name right now. I was lucky in that I didn't try any other stand. I asked the man at Pages Music in Indianapolis, where I got the cello from. I said, "What do you use for a stand?" Because I also stand up with it sometimes, and for different groups, And he recommended this bassoon stand. It's available on Amazon, and I will send you a link. And but no, it's very stable, and I mean you can raise it up quite a bit as well. You can hardly the cello stuff, but you can raise it up to that point. And I have the cello fully extended for me to stand up with it. And I used to have a little mod, because sometimes one thing I noticed was we're used to with the cello, with the acoustic instrument, we're used to kind of rotating the instrument. Oh, going down here. And you don't really have that feature here as much unless you could leave it slightly. No, I wouldn't recommend that. But sometimes I take off one of the rubber things here, so I have a little bit of room to just sort of move it this way and that, and you can put gaff tape around it, make sure it doesn't harm your instrument. But no, it's been a lifesaver, and finally, it's always been a problem to travel with though. And I finally did get a case that fits guitar, the cello, the stand, everything. It's very heavy, but it's good for airport stuff. And then another Amazon purchase recently was for the loop station. The new RC600 has these very, very small, for me, very small switches. And I always wear boots and they always get stuck in the treads and you know. And also, if you play barefooted, I find them very hard to use. So I will also send a link to these, but they're called Barefoot Stompers, I think is what I Googled, for the RC600. And I just put them on last week and it is just way easier to, that's my last loop, way easier to use. And I do believe they're slightly quieter, but still not super quiet. But that's what the volume is from. And I tried the same on my Axe unit and it did not work as well, so these seem to be pretty specific. But the half speed, the reverse, actually quite enjoy that. I do more of that with also like plucking or percussive things as well. I mean, it's great for both, but I've noticed I use it more for that. But there's so many effects on the 600. They're much more usable, I feel like, than previous versions. I use the effects on the 300 too, but these are like, oh, I like the stereo effects that it has more, like the stereo delays and panning. It's kind of like, oh, it's nice. It really differentiates the loop from the solo instrument over it. I like that. And what are some other features I've been falling in love with this? It is, I can't recommend enough making sure the firmware is updated consistently. I have found it to be slightly buggy here and there. But that being said, and I have vowed many times to go back to my 300. I'm like, no, I'm giving this up. I'm going back to 300. But no, I'm fully in love with the 6 tracks at this point, so there's no going back.
Have you changed the default factory settings?
I always set it to automatically overdub. And then, what are some other things? I mean, I'm constantly adjusting. That's mostly memory-based stuff, I think. I'm trying to think of any other system settings that I've done. I'm sure there's been some, but I can't remember as much. But I'm constantly adjusting the memory settings. So I do have, everybody uses their looper in a different way. I guess some people, they'll use like just a few settings in there. Everything is, created right there on the spot. I do pre-save my settings for each song. Some songs, for example, I have maybe the first 3 tracks set to free, for a certain song. So, you can record them at any length you want, whatever. And then the last 3 tracks are set to sync, loop sync, or tempo sync. But maybe they're not all the same length. So I know that this loop I'm going to, for the more through-composed songs I know this loop's going to be 4 bars. But I want the second, in this case, would be the 5th track to be 12 bars. So that kind of stuff, I write that all into the patches and save that, and I name that patch after the song. So, and I use that feature a lot. And also the fade out times, the fade in times, different for each track. And so, but then, I have my basic, just like everything's gonna be loop sync patches, and everything's gonna be free patches or the combination. Well, I've never had to reinstall it after an update. I do back it up just in case, for sure. Because that's what after a while, that's a lot of songs, and you just have to go back and, So I always back it up on my laptop, and then, but I've never had to fully load the patches back in, or occasionally I have some found sounds or percussion elements and stuff I'll save on there for certain songs, and I've never had to upload them again. So it seems like a pretty good system.
So, for example, if I wanted to play one of your pieces, but on the viola, electric viola, you could send me your settings, and I could install those.
Yep. That's a good question. If you could actually just send the settings from like the patch. I'm not sure. Otherwise, I would have to like write it out when I did. It would be like in the notations, the long
Yeah.
notes for that piece. But I know that you can do that with this mixer, all the settings and routings and all that stuff. I'm constantly relying on Matt to save that and give me and send me certain things like that. And I'm assuming that I could do the same thing with the FM9. I just haven't really had experience with other people using the same things as much. But I would say the looper would be the one that, yeah, a lot of people have this model. Then I run it through an IR pedal by Audio Sprockets. So I actually recorded the sound of my 1890s instrument that stays at home now like a diva, and I mapped that onto this instrument.
Oh, that's great.
I forgot another element of my rig is most people often they'll use these expression pedals for volume, whereas I like to have a little bit more control over my volume as far as when I want to solo over something. I want to know it's like 4 decibels above, my normal rate. So I just have a foot switch for that. But this I actually use for the mix of the delay. So it's kind of fun to be able to demonstrate here. Go from one cello sound, and all of a sudden, I'm gonna bring in the little cello section here with the delay. And back to one cello. Yeah. So I have my delay set up on my multi-effects unit. Any effects unit works the same way in this case. So you have your delay, and then I have an external expression pedal set up, and it's mapped specifically to to control the wet of the delay signal. So therefore, you can go from this is with it all the way back here. There's no delay. In fact, let's make it as dry as possible here. So this is just no effects, no nothing, no bridge, anything. And then when you're sustaining a note, sometimes it's fun. Now watch I'm raising the pedal up here, so. And without it. And the thing with a guitar, and I'm speaking very just from my own standpoint here, is it's a more percussive thing, so it's easier for you to hear the delay, like the ba 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 ba, whereas with a sustained instrument like this, or if you have a lot of the distortion or drive on your guitar, it's more subtle because you're not hearing the beginnings. Like if I was going like this, you would hear that more. And I used that in the last song I did. I used that more percussive feature, but it can be very subtle and just with the sustained note too. I like this effect. This makes it sound like not more cellos, but like a cello with a few aliens involved. So harmonies and stuff like that, harmony pedals will also, of course, as you know, help with thickening up the sound of one instrument. Other things, I was the only child and I was homeschooled, so I had to, these were my friends, and that's my tale of woe. But it was I quite enjoyed it. But I'm always trying to manipulate the harmony features here and make it sound more like, oh, I have a little string quartet playing with me. So 2 harmonizers at once. You just bring it in and out, the harmonies, So I've always enjoyed the idea of, because it's painfully obvious to me that I am alone, when I'm playing alone, and I grew up playing in string quartets, with through composed classical pieces, And I was noticing that, I guess people use loopers in so many different ways. But I was noticing sometimes it's like, oh, you can really, with some people you can tell they're looping. It's like you build the track and then overlay and overlay and overlay and then we take them all out, And I wanted to figure out as many kind of creative ways to involve different voices as possible without it sounding like it was loop. So sometimes that's just real-time effects with harmonizers or delay, very helpful to make it sound like I'm not alone. And but also more creative ways to use the looper as well. But yeah. Other ways to thicken up, I guess one cello sound would be chorus and stuff like that. But it has a very kind of unique. He says no. I can see on his face like no. It has a very unique sound to it, Actually, this is something I should bring for next time. I have a freeze pedal. You guys, know about freeze pedals? Ooh, that might be a really fun new thing. I didn't bring today. I should have brought it. It's tiny too. I brought all the large things, but not the tiny freeze pedal. But it basically you hit a note and it captures that. You just toggle it. And you're like, I want that note to sustain. Would you like to play this instrument? You can just pull this out a little bit here. Kind of get stuck in it, and then just.